Isn't it wonderful when
getting older. Come back in on the day, they do it.
Well, then I'm going to, at one point, I'll let you know when there's something I would.
Hi, Charlie.
Joe, how are you? Big one. Sorry. And the chair. Extra chair. This looks fantastic.
This young lady wants to take not me.
One thing if I'm trying to do is just bring up my delivery.
Sushi.
So that does help. So if you're travelling, you can just ask to shop stuff. How long are you going to be in?
One knowledge job.
Wonderful. Just the right time of year. I'm going to get lost out.
You got a cottage?
Everything.
The other one.
The sun road.
I haven't seen you in ages.
I get
So I made you famous for Twitter.
Like everybody, I read Mary Barnes in the 60s or 70s or whatever it was. If you can remember, you weren't there. Joe and Freud, poor old Freud, have much in common.
That's a shame.
They're falling apart now. A curious mind, a tenacity for discovery, and a relentless search for truth in the self and other. Freud's long odyssey took him away, in my opinion, from his Jewish roots. Or so it seemed until Joe's book that we are celebrating came out today. Joe's lifelong odyssey was a search for the dignity of humanity, looking for salvation in the world of psychiatry, where then, as now, the doors of heaven were firmly closed and locked to the humane treatment of individuals in distress. Thank you, Lizzie, good line. Joe's inspirational odyssey took him from Columbia University and Albert Einstein College to the streets of London, where, true to that song's lyrics, he hoped he would change your minds. He did, I think, as you can see from everybody here, influencing countless people with his inspired work and character. And his charisma, he had, that still does, sorry about that, still has charisma.
For a few years left.
Joe is, of course, especially known for his work with Mary Barnes, and it's a pity she can't be here with us, which led to his first book.
She would enjoy it. Okay, she would.
Yeah.
Maybe for you.
And books that cover every possibility. Madness, malice, sanctuary, paranoia, psychosis, hate. Joe's done it all. And he's also written books about it as well. Actually, I first came across Joe in 1967. You won't remember me then. At the Dialectics of Liberation conference. I was 17 at the time, and I bought a black polo neck jumper especially for the occasion. My mother dropped me off and said she'd pick me up in 3 hours' time. I also went to Grosvenor Square with her, actually. I went in, I was very impressed by this person, who I mistook for Allen Ginsberg. And I might have burbled something about Howl, the poem I was particularly impressed by the time. He was very kind and treated me like a sort of mad person. Joe, as you know, went on to found Arbours, in particular the Crisis Centre, where he was director for 35 years. He was his own man, true to his beliefs, and I think he still is. His beliefs that patients need a mental space to be understood. In my mind, and this is a big thing for me to say, I do put him alongside Mary Jackson and Hannah Siegel, who I think did something similar with psychotic patients or people who were considered mad. The journey for truth didn't stop. People who were considered untreatable by conventional practice found a home where they could find a home within themselves. As also, as we can see from people here, did many of Joe's staff in this most innovative of settings. I've only finished. And one can view this treatment of psychosis as a mystical experience, which I don't, or just a cure of love, care, humanity, and presence, and being with others. If you want people not to behave thoughtlessly in our society, you have to give them an experience of being thought about. And I think Joe is particularly good at that. He brings a coherence to the inner world that many of his staff will attest to. So Joe's search for truth did not end here in his clinical work. Joe has been able to foster in his life the art of love and love of his guests and patients. And I thought I'd do a bit of market research around some of the residents who I contacted recently. I asked them to give me 2 words to describe Joe. I've censored a few of them, I do apologise. But, okay. I've got on here, a bear. Cuddly and grizzly, occasionally polar, but basically Teddy. Big guy. Loving. I had that 7 times. Okay. So I think we can take that as the winner here. Brave. And my favourite one, somebody said, he's murderously loving. Okay. Nice phrase. So he's been able to foster the art of love. For Joe, he returned to the fold of Judaism, perhaps to the Father, and is revealing in his much celebrated book, The Journey of the Father of Psychoanalysis, the uncovering of Freud's own Judaism. And by so doing, I think, he's celebrating Joe's rediscovery too, and journey home to Judaism, which is how I read the book, to be honest. I wonder what that young radical at the Dialectics of Liberation, who was so kind to me, even though I thought he was Allen Ginsberg, would make of his latest search for truth. Freud dared to allow his creativity, with its roots in his racial history, so beautifully evoked by Joe's wonderful book, to evolve from his sacred past, by both valuing it as a metaphor for the internal world, but also, I would say, perhaps leaving it behind. I think Joe's book brings these two together, the sacred and the new, and they both need each other, rather than end up with this split. So I'd like to finish there and say thank you, Joe, for your wonderful book. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. How did this book begin? It began in 1982. I was asked to give a talk on psychoanalysis and Kabbalah, which is a Jewish mystical tradition. And from this talk, I saw there's a big connection between the two. I surmised that psychoanalysis is a secular version of Kabbalah. And in the book, I explain why. Then in the 90s, the early 90s, I got a call from Rabbi Lou here. Rabbi Lou, you called me? And he says, Joe! I said, what, Rabbi Lou? He said, did you hear that Freud treated the Rebbe Rashav? He saw the Rebbe Rashav, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. I said, Rabbi Lou, I love you very dearly. I don't believe you. He had one more go. He says, John, and this is the clincher, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe revealed who the fifth Rebbe, he was the seventh Rebbe, who the fifth Rebbe, or the Rashab, had gone to for help. And what could I say? Obviously it was true, but I was thinking, here's something I could write about. And I was there. Now you don't have to know that when Rabbi Groner comes to the mikveh, he goes in and the water goes out. But he says, he says to me, the person I never met before, Joe, did you hear about Freud and Rashab? Yes, I heard about it, Rabbi Groner. So I said, well, I'll write about it. He denied 100% he did not know Hebrew. This is Freud, who was proficient in languages. If anybody said all he had to do was study a language for a short period of time and he would learn it. Now it turned out that he studied Hebrew for years with his father in the gymnasium, in the secondary schools. He was the Hebrew scholar. He obviously knew Hebrew. Did he know Yiddish? His mother always spoke Yiddish at home. How could he not know Yiddish? And so forth. So following these contradictions, if you scratch a physicist, or you scratch a psychoanalyst, you'll find that 2 generations back, there was a Kabbalist. Many people have helped me with this book. Particularly my wife, Shri. Where are you, Shri? Shri was trying to help me with the editing of it, reading it, and putting up with me while I was writing it. And also Teva. And many others, to whom I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to the endorsements, beautiful endorsements, which Stephen and Tali and Rabbi Lou and others have given me. I'm grateful for you all coming here, particularly all the people who work with me at the Crisis Center. All my old friends. We can start a new Crisis Center here. It's very appropriate. So thank you very much. And with that being said, I would also like to say, so wine that brings joy also means wine that brings Freud. And Freud also brings insight, delight. Through psychoanalysis, we see delight, but we also want to feel delight, joy. So it works both ways, to see the light and to feel the light. And that should be the function, one of the functions, big functions of psychoanalysis, to help a person get to a point where he or she could feel the light. I'd like to say, everybody, take some wine now, if you could, because I want to make a toast to the Freud Museum. Can you pass out some wine?
You do it symbolically.
Symbolic.
Branch of AA.
This is for the Freud Museum. For those in the Freud Museum, all the people who work here as celebrating the work of Freud and Anna Freud, his daughter, and all the psychoanalysts everywhere.
That's what's up.
Afterwards, by the way, do have some more joy than wine. You know?
So it's very interesting to find this in Joe, and I think what I want to say about Joe is that he does have a huge impact on people, and it's really remarkable how many people you meet who have met him, who remember. You know, he makes a mark on them. He's kind of controversial sometimes, certainly charismatic and impressive, but also a life force, one of those life forces that you engage with every time you meet him. I think that's all I want to say about Joe. I want to say something about the book, although the first thing I want to say was about the house. I mean, it's really lovely to have this here. I did my 50th birthday party here, and I thought that was the only time that there'd ever been kosher catering in Sigmund Freud's house. But clearly, it's becoming quite a liberal establishment. And I kept having this thought, Freud is turning in his grave. But I knew Jewishness. He loved kosher food. He liked quite a lot of things, and they weren't all kosher. It was wonderful coming to England. You know, people recognised him. You could write a letter which said, Professor Freud, London, and it would get to him. Try that today. But the only downside was the number of people who so kindly wanted to convert him to Christianity. He was going to hold on to his Jewishness, and he really saw himself in that light. An old Jew trying to find somewhere to die. And this house kind of was part of that. Well, one of the things that Joe does beautifully in the book, actually, he does a number of things, but there is a strand of debate between Freud's Jewishness as an identity and his Judaism as a kind of religious affiliation, and that is contentious. It's very, very interesting. The book is really interesting around that because it's a very contentious issue. Okay, so we accept that Freud was Jewish identified, but was he identified with Jewish religious belief? As Joe documents, his grandfather was extremely religious. His father abandoned Hasidism. Freud himself claimed not to know anything about it, and yet there's plenty of evidence that, again, as Joe has mentioned, that he did know much more than he thought, than he claimed, than he revealed. Freud would say, it's a personal matter. My belief in telepathy is a personal matter, just like my smoking and my Judaism. I think that's such an interesting comment. The things that hang around in the background, the things that are hidden, the smoke that gets in your eyes. Telepathy is a kind of bit of occultism in psychoanalysis that we're not quite sure about. Smoking is what killed Freud. And Judaism, Jewishness, it hovers there in the background of psychoanalysis from start to now, both as an unrecognized element in it, as something which provokes enormous, intense, what are called transferences, affiliations to it, and a provocation to anti-Semitism as well, and hostility to psychoanalysis. All these things are there in it. It's a very, very complex terrain. I'll just talk about, I think, just one element of this, two more elements of this, and I'll stop. So I said that Tally would go on for about 5 hours, but I probably will. Anyway, you'll just stop me soon. I thought, I'm working on Hasidic time here, okay? There's a lot of interest in time currently, and nobody, as far as I know, has done any research into Hasidic time, but it's like ever-expandable time. I'm working on that. Okay, unlike psychoanalytic time, it's extremely precise. You have to pay extra. And there's a lovely, you know the Woody Allen joke, you know, I would have killed myself except I was in an analysis with a strict Freudian, he charged for the missed session. That's psychoanalytic time, classic time. Anyway, one of the things that Joe does beautifully is pull out the parallels between psychoanalysis and Jewish mysticism. And the classic one, which he writes about, I think, exquisitely in this book, in a particular chapter, is the relationship between reparation and tikkun. So the question is, what's the relationship between these things? Well, I think Joe thinks that the Kabbalistic notion of tikkun seeps kind of underground into the psychoanalytic notion of reparation. By this long history of Jewish thought about what tikkun might mean in the consequence of destructiveness, which then makes it possible for these Jewish psychoanalysts, secular Jews, to think, what do we do with individual personal destructiveness? And to draw on that same tradition. And again, I think Joe pulls this into being extremely well. I mean, the last thing I just want to mention is there's some fantastic history in this book. And this encounter between Freud and the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, which I didn't believe at all, and I'm very reassured that you didn't believe it at first because it seems so impossible, and yet the documentation is really convincing. It's really convincing. It's just an extraordinary moment in which these two great Jewish men, radically different in their ways, and these two great Jewish men come together, and something fuses between them despite the radical differences in the places in which they locate themselves. Anyway, I think it's a beautiful story. I think it's beautifully done. The whole book is like that. Joe keeps returning to this particular story, actually. There's something emblematic in it, I think, about the bringing together of these different sides of a Jewish life. And it's very profoundly done, and I deeply recommend it to you, and I want to wish Joe Mazal Tov on his production.
Right, so I'm going to try and keep this brief. I'm very honoured to be able to be here with you, with Joe, and Shri and this very, very special event.
Ali.
It's a happening. We're at a happening joining together three key elements, the triad. These three key elements, obviously, Sigmund Freud, Judaism, and Joe. The discovery of the hidden Freud, the Jewish and Hasidic aspects which Joe reveals and explores in this remarkable book, is a very significant step. As presented by Joe, the Jewish Kabbalistic model of existence, describing both personal and global exile, with images of separation, reparation, and redemption, pathways of atonement and at-one-ment, are the broad, complex background of and measure of Freud and of society as a whole. In Joe's earlier book, written together with Dr. Stanley Schneider, Centers of Power, the Convergence of Psychoanalysis and Kabbalah, Joe reveals the deep Kabbalistic model within the psychoanalytic project. In tonight's book, Joe goes further. He reaches into Freud's inner points of fragmentation, dissimulation, self-deception, and concealment, analyzing the father of psychoanalysis and revealing the deep connection with Judaism, famous rabbis, Kabbalah, and the infinite radiance of the divine, which the Kabbalists tell us had to be hidden in order to create the finite world. We now come to the third element, Joseph Berke himself, the master therapist in tonight's story. Joe expresses the most profound qualities as a person, a friend, a therapist, a thinker, a writer, as a Jew, and in particular, as a Chassid. Over the decades, Joe has gradually broadened his reach from treating individuals to creating a therapeutic ethos at Arbor's Sanctuary, writing profound critiques of society, and now, in effect, putting psychoanalysis and Freud, its founder, on the couch, listening to what they say and writing an important book about it. Obviously, a beautiful example of his work with individuals is there in Mary Barnes' two accounts of a journey through madness, which Joe and Mary wrote together. I'm very happy that I had the zchut, the merit, to meet her in Jerusalem at Joe and Shri's wedding. A further development is his ability to transmit, through Arbor's and personal example, the art and faith of unconditional love to other therapists, some of whom are here, and also to a host of others who have had the good fortune to come in contact with him, among whom I'm grateful to count myself. On a yet broader level, Joe is also a therapist of society as a whole, or seeking to be that, if society will only want to change. As we see in his books, The Tyranny of Malice, exploring the dark side of character and culture, Why I Hate You and You Hate Me, the interplay of envy, greed, jealousy, and narcissism. Joe is trying to cure. Joe is trying to cure the world. Finally, for the moment, at this moment, because I know he has a heap of books inside him just waiting to be written, and he's going to be writing them, with the help of God, there's our book this evening, The Hidden Freud, His Hasidic Roots, in which Joe is reaching into the very guts of Freud's psyche, of psychoanalysis, and of Western culture, piercing the veils, revealing the hidden, recognizing and reviving the Jewish and even Hasidic dimension of Freud is not just an incidental feature in the biography of a famous man. I believe it's a step forward in helping our world to move towards tikkun, repair, or as Joe puts it elsewhere, repair. Joe is blowing away the dust from the engraved Hebrew letters of Freud, of society, and all of us. discovering the infinite love within. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Polly. Thank you very much, David. Now, enjoy the rest of the evening. There's more food, there's more booze. Buy some books by all means. And thank you for coming.